folks will continue to join us. But I thought we would begin with the Psalm 121 today, familiar Psalm to all of you. Oops, this is Psalm 122. Let me find my way back here. I could probably do it from memory, but I won't try it. All right. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. The Lord will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. So a simple question for sharing in small groups will give you just about 5 minutes. 2 questions. One is, the psalmist says, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Where of late are you finding help? What are you finding helpful, or where are you finding help in your current role as pastor or synodically authorized minister or deacon? And a follow-up question is, where have you longed for help, or in what ways have you hoped for help that maybe hasn't come yet? So those are the 2 questions. What's helping? What help are you hoping for? Today, we have a very full agenda, so we will step through it. If you have questions, just raise your hand using the reactions button, or just unmute yourself and speak up, because we're going to need to move along. But I do want to allow you to ask any questions you have too. That's okay. We're going to start with compensation guidelines, 2022 compensation guidelines that were passed at Synod Assembly.
Were you going to have people share?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris. So what did you hear? What help? I'd love to hear someone report out on what you heard on what help you're finding in the Lord or receive, what help you're grateful for in your current role right now. Go ahead, John.
I'm gonna jump in. We actually never really took on that question. We talked more about the kind of help we wish we would get.
Okay.
And in group 5, we talked about especially how wild and hairy school board meetings are getting in our communities over the whole masking issue and vaccination and misinformation that's even being spewed out by medical professionals at some of these meetings. And so that was really the whole topic of our group.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It's what, if it's not this, it's that, in terms of things people are finding to divide over and to fight about. Thanks. What else?
Our group had help received by just the revitalizing of Sunday schools, and more people than previously showing up, and the pastor, Paul Snyder, not having to do it, but the people stepping up. That's helpful.
That's really helpful.
Rich talked about receiving help from a friend, just having a day at the golf course or sometime at the golf course, just to be yourself and be authentic and not have to worry about just, a little bit of Sabbath time.
Mm-hmm.
Deacon John talked about the Indigenous Peoples Day and the support that had received, not only from students, but from people outside of the community coming and thinking that was important, and that being a kind of a gracious sign of that you're going in the right path. You're doing work that's important and valued. And
yep.
And I had just shared that with my council meeting on Sunday, I've been pretty transparent, and you know, it's kind of sometimes hard to be vulnerable with your council, but I trust them all, and I was they responded with just great support and a sense of what can we do, you know, really
Good.
to step up. And so that was a really good sign of help. And then we all want to go into a hermitage, like Thoreau, and just be, in some sense, we're longing for some kind of, I guess maybe some solitude or just respite from it all. That's our group, pretty much, in a nutshell.
Thank you for that. There is a leader in our synod, a retired pastor named Blair Anderson, who actually has hermitages that you can go into. So if you want more information about that, ping me. Anything else? Let's hear from one more, if we could. Don't be shy.
I'll go ahead for our group, this Al Brooks. Without going into detail, two of us had incidences of something not going well and asked for help and immediate response by either
Nice.
council or just general, those that can help with a particular situation, and much appreciated. And it was like quick on the ball.
Good. Thank you. And how about help that people longed for? Were you able to talk about that at all, Al?
Well, I'll say my own, a group
Okay.
of us that used to get together prior to COVID every week for lunch or having lunch tomorrow. And I think we're all really looking forward to it.
Good. That's good.
Colleagues from our denomination and others.
Good. I'm glad that's happening. Well, thanks, everybody. Let's pray. Holy God, I give you thanks for these leaders, for their heart of service, for their willingness. I know, and you know, Lord, that it is sometimes a soul-wrenching challenge and so crushing. But you are the restorer of souls. So restore these dear ones. Let them find the help and give them the help, Lord, oh Lord, for you are the one from whom our help comes. So come quickly to restore them, give them the help they need. And we give you thanks for the help that you provide every day. Open our eyes to see you present in our world, in creation, in the community of faith, and of course, in the word and the sacrament. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Thanks for slowing me down there, Chris. Let's jump in then. Our first topic will be compensation guidelines for most of you, though not all. I know some of you have your annual meetings earlier and you pass a budget much earlier. But for those of you who are on a more traditional schedule, this might be the time when you're visiting with your leadership about your compensation. And so wanted to just have some time to look at the compensation guidelines briefly to talk about changes this year. And we did pass these at this year's Synod Assembly, was one of the 6 resolutions. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Deacon John, who is one of the members of the Compensation Guidelines Committee. Thanks for your work, John, and your committee's work, and thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm one of 2 deacons that's a part of the compensation committee. Kathy Hunstead is the other. You know, something that I shared in the short video that was shared during Synod Assembly is there have been so many changes to this roster over the last few years. And that's, I think, important context to know, is that in terms of the roster of deacon, there's a lot of education that we all need to be doing. And if you're not a deacon, if you're a pastor or a SAM, those of us who are deacons would greatly appreciate. I'm gonna take the liberty of speaking on behalf of deacons here. We would appreciate your assisting in that education. Some of the kind of even basic changes, that there is this roster of deacons. It's a ministry of word and service, that we also now are ordained, that is, you know, the entrance right for us as well. I mean, just some of these changes that have happened within the last few years, we'd be grateful for that. Another kind of framing thing that I want to say that I didn't share in the video is that, of course, there's the reality of whether or not people will follow compensation guidelines, right? Some faith communities, some congregations, some colleges may or may not choose to follow compensation guidelines. And we recognize that as we went about making changes, not just to these guidelines, but to all of the guidelines. We noted that especially with the guidelines for deacons, for ministers of word and service, because it is a bump up in a couple of different ways for most deacons, not for all, but for most. And of course, an additional reality of that is the difficult financial situation that many congregations and organizations are in at this time, including because of COVID. So with those two pieces of framework laid out, as I shared in the short video before, as a part of Synod Assembly, our attempt in changing the guidelines was to make them more equitable. And also more user-friendly in figuring out how to take into consideration essentially the same values that we use when we discern and determine compensation for pastors, for example. So things like additional training and education, leadership responsibility, and previous relevant work experience didn't used to live within the compensation guideline for deacons as it has for pastors. So just to give you my own personal example, by our previous compensation guidelines, I am compensated within those guidelines at my work and call at Concordia College. By the new guidelines, I'm over $10,000 underpaid. And I don't share that for any kind of like feel sorry for me. I simply want to use that as an example of the way in which the new guideline takes into consideration things like additional training and education, leadership responsibility, and previous relevant work experience in a way that the old guidelines did not. Another change is in the layout, and I'm going to pull that up so that we can all look at that together. Can everybody see my screen? I see some nods and some thumbs up. Great, thanks so much. If you remember the old...
Can you make it a little bigger?
I sure can. Thanks, Al. Woo. Is that better? All right. If you recall, the previous guideline had ranges, and those ranges were for years. And that also potentially led to people being undercompensated because an organization, a church could choose to compensate towards the bottom end of that range when the individual might have been at the top edge of that range of work experience. So we took essentially the same kind of column and step approach that's utilized in the compensation guidelines for pastors. Sorry, somebody's probably walking in our yard. And used that for deacons as well. So we have years of experience, and then we did separate out the difference between a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, since there's a difference in education there. So the idea is that you use this table to find your years of experience through looking at your years of consecration / ordination, and then looking at that baseline degree earned. And then on top of that, these considerations come into play just as they do for those of you who are pastors. Are there additional earned degrees? Is there another earned degree above and beyond or alongside a master's degree? And then the next is there additional training and certification that's relevant to that call and to that work? For example, I just completed the 2-year training in facilitating and leading contemplative prayer and retreats through the Shalem Institute. So if you want to go away to that hermitage, I can come hang out with you and do some contemplation. But the way that we're suggesting you use this is essentially to compare it similar to a graduate level credit bearing class. So kind of looking at it weighted in that way. Second is leadership responsibility. What is the leadership responsibility of this particular call? And we left this fairly wide open in terms of how to define it. For example, I am a co-equal leader of the ministry at Concordia College. So that should be taken into consideration when I'm compensated. I'm not an associate. Another example would be someone who is leading a very vital and vibrant ministry of equipping. I'm thinking of like Kathy Hunstead in her previous iteration of her call at Trinity when she was leading youth education and equipping like dozens of lay ministers and supporting them in order to do this incredibly vital and wide and deep ministry, which takes a lot of leadership. And then number 3 is relevant work experience. So does the deacon for whom you're figuring out compensation have previous relevant work experience? So an example I can use there is that I'm a second career minister, and my previous career was in higher education. I have, about 10 to 15 years of being a faculty member at the college and university level. And I use that every day in my call as a minister on a college campus. So how is that taken into consideration for a deacon, just as it is for a pastor? So that's a quick tour of the guidelines. I'm just going to close this door for a moment to prevent further dog interruption. Any questions? It should sound fairly familiar, y'all, because it's basically the same pattern that you use if you're a pastor.
Thanks, Deacon John. I'm grateful that these guidelines have been revised in such a way to make it equitable, more equitable for our deacons. Some of the maybe overall changes, the suggested increase, other than the normal step increase for years of experience, is somewhat lower than in past years. It's just, instead of a percentage amount or a cost of living percentage increase, it's just $1,000, which I know is lower. And I think what the committee's trying to do there in a responsible fashion is to sort of navigate between the need to be kept up with the cost of living and the reality that congregations are living in, that many, now though not all, congregations are living in, that of somewhat reduced finances due to COVID. And there is a statement in the, I believe in the on the page that includes the chart with the base salary, that congregations that aren't experiencing greatly decreased finances should consider a more appropriate COLA adjustment of 2 or 3% based on historical numbers. So another change that happened a couple of years ago, but I want to highlight it because it came up at the first call retreat here. For some reason, the formula for pastors or rostered ministers who are in a parsonage did not include an appropriate Social Security offset for the value of the parsonage. As some of you probably know or have found out, you have to pay a Social Security on the value of your parsonage. You have to pay for the SECA, or the self-employment compensation, self-employment tax on that. And so the formula was revised to make sure that the congregation was taking, or the entity was taking into consideration the fact that you also have to pay, while you don't pay income taxes on that amount, you do pay Social Security taxes on that 30% of the base salary, which is how the IRS values the value of the compensation of the parsonage. I want to say something else, which is somewhat unrelated, but it has been an issue. So we have congregations that insist that the pastor live in or near the community. And while that may or may not make sense as a practical matter, I mean, in some cases, congregations want their pastor or their deacon or their SAM to live in the community, but the actual housing allowance that they provide isn't enough to pay for a house for what they cost in that community. And when that happens, we do challenge those congregations to understand and take that into consideration and increase their housing allowance. But I want you to know that it is a valid request on the part of the congregation. The reason why pastors and military members do not pay income tax on their housing, the whole rationale behind the Title X law that establishes that tax break that we all receive, and which some deacons may receive as well, depending upon the nature of their work, is because the assumption by the IRS is that you have an employer that gets to have some say over where you live. And so it's treated like a kind of a hybrid business expense by the IRS. So that is the rationale. And I realize that everybody's situation is somewhat different, but if you are in a situation where you're receiving a housing allowance and your congregation has an expectation that it be within a certain distance of the community or the congregation you're serving, we can certainly get involved to help negotiate that reality, but it's not an unreasonable request. It might be unreasonable if they're not providing enough for housing, or if the circle they're drawing is extremely tight. But in general, it's not unreasonable on its face. So any questions about that? Okay.
I wonder if I could
All
plug
right.
in with just two quick other things
Please,
and
please.
close. So just to reiterate, what we attempted to do in terms of the compensation guidelines for deacons was to create a tool that could be fair and equitable for the wide range of deacons that we have serving through our church. That wide range, both in terms of education, in terms of leadership responsibilities, in terms of previous work experience, that whole list of variables. Within that, I also didn't do a comprehensive search, but I did look at 3 different programs at 3 different seminaries to see where we're at in terms of the degree of requirements that we're expecting our deacons to earn at this time in order to serve our church, and for pastors. And it certainly still is more credits for pastors at this time. So that is still a consideration within these guidelines. And then the last thing that I want to say is that you pastors hold a lot of power that we deacons do not hold. So when it comes to conversations about equity, we need you. We need you as advocates and allies, because on our own, we're probably not going to get there. So I just want to throw that out there and just name it outright. You hold a lot of power that deacons probably will never hold. But you can be great partners and great help in terms of standing alongside us in seeking equitable compensation. And I thank you for that.
And I want to affirm that as well. I'm grateful for our entire roster and all of our leaders. And it's important that we accompany one another and bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. So when you have opportunity to advocate, I hope you will. Okay, what's next, Chris?
And then staff changes.
Yes, so did that email go out, Chris?
Not yet, because I haven't gotten word yet.
Okay. Well, there's going to be one more staff change that you're going to hear about in any minute now. And then on the 25th, you'll hear from me about how we are filling out our staff moving forward. We'll have a fully staffed Synod staff that we can celebrate on the 25th, and that we'll actually be living into by December 1st. So we've already been able to celebrate the our new incoming director for evangelical mission, Pastor Rebel Hurd. she's amazing, and she's stepping into she has, and a large legacy of the great work that Pastor Keith Zay has done. And I know that she's gonna just be a huge blessing to you and to our synod. I hope that you'll reach out to her and invite her to come. She needs to get connected around our synod, just like I did a couple of years ago. And so looking forward to her starting on November 15th. On October 25th, we'll announce who has accepted the call to serve, to take Carla's role that she's retiring from as the Associate for Synod Administration. And we'll also be announcing a new support staff person and how we're reconfiguring and who we are bringing on in our ministers for community and leader engagement. I want you to know that I'm not at all anxious about these changes. I'm sad to see folks leave. Some of our staff, we've known that they would be departing around now from day one, with the retirements of Carla and Pastor Keith. We've understood that neither of those would likely be with me for my entire term. But it was really helpful to have them stay on for the time they did, so that we could have a good transition from the previous staff to from the previous bishop to me and my staff. So I'm super grateful to both Carla and Keith for their good work. I know that Pastor Karen has spoken about her desire to, Pastor Karen Young-Trenny, who has left her position as the pastor in Fisher Bigland, and also her part-time role as Minister for Community and Leader Engagement for conferences 3 and 5. And she had indicated to me early that she would love to find a role as a senior pastor or senior minister or executive pastor in a large congregation. And that opportunity opened up right across the river with the unexpected and untimely death of the pastor at Sharon Lutheran. And so she's able to live into that call and provide service to that community as they grieve and move forward. There'll be another announcement soon. So looking forward to being able to share with you this changes, and then we will also share how there's a slight restructuring, though not very major, with how we're doing ministers for community and leader engagement. Synodically authorized minister Kathy Levenhagen, we've added to her portfolio. She will also be taking the community and leader engagement responsibilities for Conference 3, which is the Crookston Conference. So she'll be the one that shepherds call processes and intervenes early in any kind of transition or conflict that may be emerging. And she'll also, she had most of the responsibility for synodically authorized ministers, except for the paperwork portion. She'll be taking that paperwork piece on, and she will also be screening incoming rostered minister profiles from both within and especially from outside our synod. We have a Thursday meeting of our call process staff, and she'll be bringing her screening and conversations with potential new people to our synod to that meeting every week. And that'll be really valuable for us to have someone who's just keeping an eye out for potential leaders for our synod. So Conference 5 right now does not have a minister for community and leader engagement. That's the Moorhead Conference. So I'm basically functioning in that role until the 25th, when we can announce who it is that will be taking that position. It'll be added to the role of the associate for administration. We're adding a staff person on our support staff. That'll be a 30-hour-a-week addition. She'll be taking over and the financial management for all accounts payable. This is something, and also the data entry related to that and the reporting. We have been paying an outside firm to do that work, so we need to it has been the advice of our auditors in their statement, which I'm sure you read, and you very carefully read the audit statement. I know every year at Synod Assembly, but their management letter to us has advised for a couple of years now that we bring that work in-house. And so we will be doing that, but it won't be 30 hours, it won't require 30 hours a week. And so this person will also take on some of the responsibilities that Pastor Carla has had on her plate that are more of a purely clerical nature. And that will free up our person who will be fulfilling that role as who will be coming into that role of associate for Synod administration to be more engaged out and about, and to also be able to take on Conference 5 community and leader engagement responsibilities. So lots of information there, more to come, but questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Chris.
Just a quick little thing about the staff transitions is Cheryl and I will be flying solo for a little while in November, and Bishop Bill. And so we do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible, but we just ask for a little extra patience and grace while the staff transition is happening. But yeah.
Amen.
So I'm gonna move a couple of things on the agenda around a little bit. I am sending in the chat right now is a Google form. I am working on building a new website for the Synod. It is something
Yay.
that needs to happen. If you haven't filled it out, it's 5 questions. And please do it. So I've learned a lot from the people who have filled it out already, and I'm excited to take those suggestions and run with them. Anything about that, Bishop Bill?
No, it's been something that's been a big need, and I'm glad I know that now that you've managed world peace, which was in your job description, now you can take on the website, which is even a greater challenge.
Yeah. And so that is in the thing is in the chat. And Bishop Bill, the next thing I have on the agenda is definitions and guidelines.
Okay, so in April of this last year, the Church Council of the ELCA approved the revised definitions and guidelines for discipline, which the Conference of Bishops, we had been working on that with the committee that's charged with that of our church for about a year. Whether or not there will be a replacement for vision and expectations is an open question still, but we do have a very clear and concise document in definitions and guidelines for discipline that makes clear what our ethical commitments are to each other and to our church as ministers of the gospel. And so I wanted to highlight one provision in particular because it seems to come up a lot in our synod. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about service in congregations you formerly served. So this is paragraph 14. And it goes like this: rostered ministers who have resigned or retired from or otherwise no longer officially serve a congregation or other ministry shall honor the integrity of the congregation or ministry. They shall respect and honor the current rostered minister or ministers and mission of the congregation or ministry they are no longer called to serve. And I want you to notice this next phrase, which could not be more clear. They shall decline invitations. You could put a period there, but it goes on and it doesn't equivocate in any way. In fact, it makes it even more clear. From members to perform pastoral acts and refrain from asking members to directly or indirectly seek permission to perform such acts from the currently serving rostered minister. They shall not participate or interfere, whether personally or through a proxy, in the life of the congregation or ministry in any way. unless invited to do so, to participate by the current rostered minister in conjunction with the congregation council or governing board. Such interference constitutes conduct incompatible with the character of the ministerial office or retirement status. The fact that this paragraph uses the word interference, and you'll notice the little number reference there, number 18, footnote 18, that's footnoting the provision in the Synod Constitution in which interference in congregations, not only congregations that you yourself have formerly served, but also congregations in the community that to which you are not called, and where there is a currently serving minister. And so here's how this should work. You get a call to do a wedding or a funeral from at a congregation you formerly served. You should say, thank you, I'm honored, but no, I'm not your pastor or your deacon anymore. I cannot serve you in that way. I'm your friend. I may be your friend. I may be, I certainly care about you. I simply can't care for you in this circumstance. And so I commend you to your pastor or your interim or your SAM or your deacon, whoever's serving in that role right now. And after doing that, I would hang up and I would immediately call the rostered minister who is serving in that role, whether that's an interim role or a part-time or full-time, whatever it is, and let them know, hey, I got a call from a member of the church saying, will you help? I told them no, because I understand that's my responsibility to do so. I am willing, if in your judgment you think it's okay, I am willing to be helpful. If I can be helpful, and I'm also willing to just step back if that's more helpful. And that way you by doing so, you put the ball right where it needs to be, which is in the court of the pastor that's serving there. Now, there are some circumstances that are a little more hard to discern and ethically, and that would be where there is no currently serving pastor. And in most cases, your answer should still be no, and should be to refer the person to nearby congregations. I know that I don't know of any pastors or deacons who would not make an effort to serve a family with a pastoral need of some kind, if they are able to. Now, there are a few, and I would say they are a very few situations where our congregation where the congregation is very remote, and there literally are not any serving ministers within a reasonable distance of the congregation. And in those situations, it may be appropriate for you to say, yes, I can help you in this one situation. Make it clear to the council that you're doing so because it's a unique situation, and I think for good measure, let me know or a member of my staff know too. So I'm sure you have questions about this, so I'd love for us to have a fuller conversation. So let's talk about it. Questions? John Martinson, were you raising your hand a bit ago?
I was raising my thumb like this needed to be done.
Oh, okay.
I strongly approve of that kind of statement. It's long overdue.
Well, and I just want to name it. You know, we have more retired pastors on our roster than active pastors, and many of those retired pastors live in Lakes Country because their congregate. You know, it's a wonderful place to live. I live there too, and I understand how tempting it is, how hard it is. I live a block away from a congregation that I not only served for 15 years, but I was also the founding pastor there. And so I understand that it's hard. I also understand that it's possible to say no in a way that's both loving and that respects the ministry of that congregation.
Question,
Adam.
any different guidance on, well, my own circumstance? My daughter's getting married at an ELCA church that's not where I'm serving. Obviously, she has as dad to have some role. The conversation has happened, it's gonna happen, but I mean, those kind of, it's a church I'm not serving in, but it's a family event.
So I just navigated the same issue. So I'll just share how I navigated that. All of these, every ethical question is unique, but what I said to my kids was, the pastor at the church where you're serving is the one person who, or at the church where you're having your wedding, is the person that gets to decide. And I would much prefer to be a dad than a pastor. If you need me to be a pastor, I will be. They went and met with the pastor there and came back and said, no, we don't need you to be our pastor. We're happy to have you be our dad. Pastor John reached out to me and said, do you want to be involved? And I appreciated that. And I said, I'm willing to be involved if you want me to be involved. And I did a prayer at the service. So that's how I did it. I realize it's unique when it's your child and you're a pastor, and I know every pastor regards this differently. I have lots of friends who've done all the pastoral acts for all their kids throughout their entire lives. That's their choice, but it gets a little hard when it's happening in another congregation. So any way that you can put that you can navigate that in a way that puts the ball in the court of the pastor at the congregation is the best way to go. Does that make sense, Al? Yeah. Okay.
And of course, if you get invited by the pastor church council for anniversaries of places where you serve, that's different than this as well. Right, Bishop Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Invitations from the church or from the serving pastor, that's exactly the guidelines state that's appropriate. I do, it's in guidelines and definitions for discipline, so it should go without saying, but I'll just name it. It's a matter for discipline, and I have disciplined members of our roster for this kind of behavior. So what's next?
We have another round of affinity groups starting. The deadline to sign up is this Friday. I'll put the link in the chat right now. So Mary Francis is a coach and she leads these affinity groups. Right now, the options are pastoral versus prophetic preaching, creating a hybrid church, care for creation, finding common ground, aka loving people with whom you have differences, and serving multi-point parishes. This is a offering from the Synod. It doesn't cost anything for you to be part of one of these affinity groups. They meet monthly and have good discussions. So sign up by Friday.
That's great. And these are, I think in the age we're living in requires adaptive leadership, and adaptive leadership can't happen on your own. It's by its definition in nature needs a collaborative team. And so these affinity groups are people who are curious about similar things or working on similar problems. And we have an executive coach who we pay for her time with the Synod. And she, just a slight correction, Chris, she doesn't lead the groups, she coaches them, right? So the group provides its own leadership, but she will, Mary Francis will do some of the work that oftentimes presents a barrier for you being involved. One of those things is just figuring out when to meet. She'll send out the doodle poll and kind of herd the cats to figure out a time when you can meet. And then she will also keep the notes and keep you on task with the things you've said you want to do or want to decide or want to figure out together. And these are the 4 or 5 issues that you have raised. So I hope that you'll take advantage of this opportunity. And I hope you'll sign up.
Very good. Give to the Max is coming up on November 18th. Bishop Bill will have a sermon to share if you wish for Sunday, November 14th. And that will be available by the Wednesday before that. So it will be available by November 10th at the latest. And Bishop Bill, you want to share a little bit of what Give to the Max is going towards?
Yeah, so 4 areas, all of them related to leadership, both lay and rostered leadership. One is Go For It grants, which are grants for the congregational leaders can apply for as they come to the end of a renewal process, or as they come to the point where they have discerned a way forward, but the grants will be helpful in helping them to take some risks that they might not otherwise be willing to take. So they're encouragement grants of $1,000 to $5,000. So that's one area. The other area is our 5 smooth stones for Christian leaders, which is 5 aspects of Christian leadership and formation, including spirituality, telling our faith story, being able to share that in an authentic way, not in a sermon, but just in daily life, coachability, adaptive leadership, and emotional intelligence. So we have a design for how we can deliver that as a leadership development and formation process for all leaders, not just rostered, but also lay in our synod. And we're raising some money for that. Grants, the third area is grants for congregations, or not for congregations, I'm sorry, for rostered leaders who have seminary debt. And the 5th or the 4th area is, I always forget this one. A new pathway for first call theological education, and possibly even beyond that, which involves community organizing training, entrepreneurship, ways that a minister might invite their congregation, take their congregation along with them, and making a real difference in the community. Things like, for example, reopening the cafe that closed 3 years ago, so that there's a place to gather in town for food and fellowship, and addressing the problem of food deserts by either opening some kind of a food cooperative or a grocery store. I believe our congregations are equipped to provide that kind of leadership in many communities, but it does require some training. So that's the 4th area. It's all called Leadership Next. Do you have the logo? While you're looking for that, I'll keep talking. So Leadership Next, and it's Give to the Max Day. We have generous matching funds from a donor. Our goal between both Give to the Max and Giving Hearts Day, the one that's in November coming up, and Giving Hearts in February, is to raise about $150,000, which would allow us to implement all of these initiatives over the next year or so. And so, and that'll be probably an annual. This will be our focus for a few years to come. These are the new initiatives and the way we're living into our strategic plan. And what we're asking is that you would participate at any level, personally. All gifts are welcome, small or large, and that you would invite others to participate personally. So that's one ask, is personal participation. And the last one is thanks, Deacon John, take care. And the second thing we're asking is that you would give your congregation an opportunity to participate with some kind of a special offering. opportunity around that time in November. Questions about that? We'll be providing some interpretation resources for you to use if you choose to. It can be real simple. You know, play one of the videos or put an announcement in whatever vehicle you use now to deliver announcements, and just provide a way for people to participate with a QR code or the web link, or even just collect if you're in person and you're receiving offerings that way, just receive a special offering and use that as your congregation's contribution to Give to the Max. That would be fantastic. Thanks in advance for anything you might do in that way. All right.
One more thing before, there is one question in the chat, but the Great Synod get together on Saturday, March 12th.
Yeah. So I will respond to that question. I do see it there. But let me cover this. So this year, you know, we got a lot of very positive feedback on the online Synod Assembly. And so we thought, why not take advantage of what we learned from year one and do it at least one more time. So we are going to do a virtual Synod Assembly again in 2022. But we also know that we have this longing to be together, and we are the church, and we do want to gather around word and sacrament in person as well. So on March 12th, we will hold what we're calling the Great Synod Get Together. This will be right in the middle of our synod in Detroit Lakes, where we'll have opportunities for you to ways that if your people need to travel a long ways, it'll be possible for them to stay here at some cost, of course. There'll be food, there'll be lively and inspiring worship, a keynote, some orientation. We thought this year would be helpful to just provide sort of a council, a leadership orientation for presidents and treasurers and others. And then we'll also do our conference meetings on that day. We'll knock them all out in one day. We'll have a big, large group gathering in which we provide some information and hopefully some inspiration. And then we'll send conferences off into separate breakouts, and then bring them back together and report out briefly so that we can, I think, hopefully find a more generative and engaging and inspiring way for us to conduct conference business. So we will do that little bit of business at that Synod get together. Otherwise, that get together is intended to be exactly that, an opportunity for us to do some things that we need to do together to be the church and be a synod as we journey together faithfully. So, questions or thoughts about that? All right. Well, let me respond to the question. There won't be new guidance, Phil. The guidance that I last sent out is pretty clear on our mask recommendations and what we're recommending. So I'd invite you to find that on the COVID resource page. There's a letter and I think a couple of videos. So are you looking for that, Chris? Okay. So I think those are still relevant for what we are simply recommending that people continue especially as we continue, even though it's somewhat subsiding, we are continuing to see the COVID-19 virus, the Delta variant continues to, in some cases, overwhelm, but certainly tax our healthcare system. And so it's just responsible for us to wear masks when we're indoors in large gatherings, and that would include worship. So I see there's 3 messages, but unfortunately, there it is. Okay. All right, any further questions? We did a lot of business today. Thanks for hanging in there. And thank you for your leadership. And I'm grateful for you and for our partnership in the gospel. don't hesitate to reach out if you do have questions or if there's anything you need. So, all right. God's peace, everybody. Have a blessed day.